Okay, so here we are. I think now I'm going to pick up the small brush and I'm just going to sort of establish where I want to see things in terms I'm not really doing the details per se, but um, I'm going to suggest some detail. That's the best way I can describe this. So I'll pick up my little small pointed brush and do my usual trick here. I've got a little pickle jar lid. I pick up some ultramarine blue into it, sorry. A little bit of burnt sienna into it. That's too much burnt sienna. As you can see it, I don't know whether you can see it, perhaps. It's very brown, that. So I need some more blue in the mix. I want it to be a neutral. I want this to be a mix that you can't quite work out, is it blue or is it brown? So it becomes, refer to it as a neutral if you can't really tell what bias it's taking, whether it's going to the blue or whether it's going to the brown. So it's about right there. So what have we got? I could do tree trunks with this mix, but I'm just going to satisfy my concerns here regarding the edge of the roof, perhaps, of the cafe. Now the little banners, the little advertising flag things are pale in color, so I need to stay out of those, and I'm just suggesting what might be the edges of doorways. It might be some trim, some cladding of the building. Seems to sort of have an edge somewhere around here. Can't see the edge exactly, so I don't want to know exactly what's in there. I want it to be mine. I want that shape to be made up by Howard Jones. It's because that's the way I wanted it to look in my painting. So if in real life it was a chair leaning up against a wall, and I didn't realize that at the time of painting, but I made a shape that was really interesting, it might be construed as a chair in an afterthought. But what's more important is that it was made to look interesting. The shape was contrived to improve the painting. So I'm just sticking with the same colors here, sort of given up on my little pickle jar lid. So underneath some of these flower heads, a little bit of dark like this, very random. Now I think I'm going to turn my attention to a rigger brush, still using this dry mix. If I can find my rigger brush, there it is. So let's reload this paint. I've put a load of water in there, knowing that I'm going to fill it now with more sticky paint. So it won't be very watery by the time I've finished with this mix. Don't pick up any more water. If you wanted to go really slightly opaque, pick up some cerulean blue and add to it. That brings a little bit of body to the mix, to the color. Here we are. Roll I'm rolling. I'll slow down here a minute. I'm rolling that brush around so that I know that that rigger brush now is fully loaded. It's at maximum holding capacity. And somewhere around here, there is some good tree trunks. So just to flick it, I basically hover over the painting about here and lock my arm. And then it's more or less movement of the fingers rather than, rather than the arm or the wrist even. It's mostly down to just pushing the fingers in this sort of fashion. Okay, so just taking glances up at, I have departed from the photo for the main design area, but I'm just looking for ideas from the photo now, just for certain elements, such as this tree. What I really like is the way the tonal. So if we just very quickly look at our tonal, see how this dark shape up in the upper right corner, it connects. It connects with the other dark shape that comes over here to the left. And I'm going to do that mostly by intertwining branches from the different trees. So a couple of trees about here somewhere, I think. I'm using both sometimes I'm picking paint up out of the pickle jar lid, and sometimes I'm taking it from the palette, whatever's on, wherever my mind is at the time. So branches that come sideways off these trees here are intertwining with the branches of this slightly closer tree on the right-hand side. And that brings a nice cohesion from one side of your paint into the other. I might call for some the belly of a larger brush in a moment to put some volume in these tree canopies. And just put a little bit of green in some of these upper branches. I just picked up a little bit of viridian green there and added it to the mix. Tap off anything that's too wet. So got something a little bit warmer in the pickle jar lid and something a bit cooler in my palette. I'm just going to let all that dry off a little bit, because what I'm going to do over the top of that in a moment, give you a little bit of a preview here, is probably with this brush, I'll pick up some paint when I know this is all dry, and scumble off the belly of the brush some volume, put some volume into these shapes. I think we could look at this stage, I think we can look at doing some shadow. I happen to like the color in the shadow on the photo. It's a sort of greeny blue. Now then, here's some advice about shadow colors and choosing colors. The rule books say that if you've got a warm light source, then you've got cool colored shadows. So in other words, you've got a nice bright yellowy sun, perhaps it's the end of the day. This would be a best example. The end of the summer's day, you've got a nice warm glow in the sky. The warmth obviously is coming from the sun. When you render your shadows, they should be a cool. So warm light source, cool shadows. Now, sometimes you get situations where the light source is cool because it can be early morning, the sun's in the sky, but it's not landing on, it's not illuminating anything to warm it up, but the light is bright and it's cool. Then you're looking to put in warm shadows, warm colored shadows. But if you were to use a different mindset here and just say, well, what about complementary colors? I know that that's what you're supposed to do with your shadows. I know the rule of thumb, but wouldn't it make for a better painting if you simply used complementaries? In other words, we have a yellow here, don't we? Okay, a lot of yellow sandwiching the shadow area. Okay, now surely it would be a better painting, it would be more beautiful painting if you chose the complementary color of this neighboring color, and that of course would be purple in this case. Then you get another option if you don't go to its immediate complementary. So purple being the complementary of yellow, orange being the complementary of blue, green being the complementary of red, etc., etc. What you can do, you can use another thing, which is a harmonious color. So you're not using the direct complementary purple, you're using something close on the color wheel to what's already here. And that's why I'm picking up on this bluey green. Okay. So it's not a direct complementary, but it is rather beautiful. So I'm going to mix, let's just move my brush here. I'm going to start this mix with a lovely cold green, my Viridian green. Okay. Now, if I wanted a hint of purple in this, I could pick up a cold red, which is, in this case, alizarin crimson. Okay. But I sort of like the fact that there's quite a lot of blue in this. So I'm going to go with a good hit of ultramarine blue. And somewhere in amongst this, I should end up with something quite close. Just show you what I've done here. So I picked up Viridian green. I started with Viridian green in this puddle here. I then picked up a little bit of alizarin crimson, made the green look purple, okay? But then on closer inspection, I think, oh, I do like the fact that there's a sort of thin, cool looking blue in that shadow in the photograph. So I put a bit of ultramarine blue in the mix. So I don't mix it thoroughly. If you can refrain from mixing your puddles thoroughly, what you'll end up with is subtle variations in your pool territory. I have a bluer side to my puddle over here. This side is a cool green, a greener area. So if I wanted the shadow to go a little greener, I just simply pick up from this side of my puddle. Okay, here goes. Let's see if we can do this with minimum fuss. I'm going to try and go across this ground with a single pass to start off with. I will reload. I just pick up a tiny bit of water. I will reload. You don't have to go from left to right. It's whatever's most comfortable for you. You can go from right to left. But I do want some taper at the end of this shadow. So I've just picked up a slightly smaller brush here, and I'm going to taper out the edges of the shadows. It comes into the lawn territory. The beauty sometimes of working with two brushes. Now, in a moment, I'm going to push this through into my cafe area. Just making sure I'm happy with this. Now the shadow seems to climb up into the base of the trees a bit there. I think we're okay with that. I know that I've got another shadow down here, but I'm going to try and tackle that separately. I want to get into this area. Now this area needs to be a mix, a rather random mix of cools and warms. So I'm trying to paint around those standards, those advertising things. So nice and loose. Apply it with plenty of water like this. Now some warmth. So I've just dropped most of that paint into my water with this brush to get rid of it. But I'm going to pick up some warmth, and that's burnt sienna. And I'll just warm sections of this cool cafe up with this color. I'm slightly distracted here. My cat is trying to push its way into the into my studio. There we are. So it's very abstract looking at the moment, isn't it? This. So I'm just going to make some shapes that I think I'm using the photo because I think they'll work if I use the ones in the photo. It's how we make that, you know, that edge. How that edge has got to be good as we see it in front of the cafe, and this side of the painting down here. Okay, now I'm going to put, because I know it's complementary and it should work, picking up a little bit of alizarin crimson and just putting that into the roof area, just about there. The roof in the photo is very pale, sort of very pale grey color in areas back there. But I think it should be okay if we just give it a very weak, cool red color like this. Okay, now I've just cleaned this brush and I'm going to tidy up this paint that I've just delivered. Okay, so there's the brush. It's free of paint and it's nearly free of water, but there is a bit of water in there. And I'm just going to diffuse areas to make it look more like what it's supposed to look like. And that's a slightly obscured view of the roof of this building. I'm going to put some lovely pale green yellow, which is, of course, cadmium yellow again, a little bit of viridian green. And that's going to go up in front of the cafe about here. Just looking at the textures that we can sort of see in places and the hits of brighter colors that we can see. Right, okay. I think I'm going to put this dark shadow in now that I'm ready. So I'm not bothering to clean the brush. I'm picking up the color that I used for this shadow area here, which was those three colors again. Viridian green, ultramarine blue, a little bit of alizarin crimson, but with this time with a little bit of burnt sienna in, because this shadow is really close to us and it's quite a bit darker. I can take, this is how we sort of thread and connect. I'm going to take this mix now up into here and maybe even into the cafe area a bit. So I'm just picking up more of the same color. So remember, this is the shadow color, but with some burnt sienna in it to warm it up. And I think I'm going to speed dry this now. One or two areas. If I haven't messed about too much here, I should still be able to put something a little darker in places in this shadow because it's still wet. Another big advantage of working quickly is being able to go back and improve areas you think need further attention. Now, I'm leaving these, whatever they are, the advertising things for the moment. They will need some sort of weak paint on them, the ice cream advertising flags, whatever they are. They do need to be a little bit more uniform in shape, mind you. Not too much, not too identical. Okay, now then, just slightly tricky area is this one over here with what happens in front. In a lower left corner, and how we render the busyness, not to overdo it in this left-hand corner. I think I'm okay with that. I think my building sort of shows up just about enough. I can revisit it with a little bit of extra line work with the dry paint in a moment, but I'm just going to go for the sort of finishing now. Of course, we haven't, this is what I mean, you know, it's only now we're looking at the finishing line. We're looking at those little figures and people having their picnic. We've done all this stuff, 95% of the painting, before even thinking about the the painting was entitled picnic, picnic in the sun, but it is such a small part of the painting when we actually paint it. So this is what I meant about, this is the round brush. I'm putting some body up here now into this tree. off the belly of the brush. Whatever you do, don't try painting this off the point of the brush. I'm picking up, just show you what I'm picking up. This is the shadow. This is this same mix that I was using a moment ago. So it's Viridian green, ultramarine blue, a little bit of burnt sienna, and if needs be, a little bit of alizarin crimson in there. And look at how, again, these shapes connect with each other across this canopy. I feel more like an oil painter here, holding my palette up and painting. It's quite good fun. So there's my, you can see, I hope now you can see some resemblance to my thumbnail, to my original thumbnail sketch. And how tones creep into each other. The big picture is always far more important than the smaller picture. That's, you know, that's something we must learn. And the big picture is not a mass of small detail. That's the thing. I think that's what might catch us out sometimes. The big picture is just getting your big shapes painted well, painted, you know, efficiently with conviction. That's the best way I can describe it, I suppose. Let me just pick up a little bit of sunshine here from the cadmium yellow, and I'm just going to tap a bit of that into what I've just been doing, the canopy up here. Now there's probably still too sparse in areas, so I'm cleaning the brush as I speak and making sure there's no paint in it, but leaving a tiny amount of water in here. And I'm going to further just take these sort of shapes a little further out. And these are a lot softer, as you can see. They don't have the same tonal strength, these shapes that I'm making now. So we're getting our mid-tones. What I'm putting in here is now our mid-tones. Because you've got to be very careful not to jump just from your lightest tones to your darkest tones. You've got to have some tones in between. But if you work in this way, you don't have to stress yourself out with the mid-tones. You just must make sure that they're there by the end of the painting. Okay, so this area is a bit weird for me now, and that's because I've followed the photograph. Okay, there's evidence, there's proof of what we were saying earlier. This does not work, and that's what's in my photo, a pale area there over the roof. So I'm going to close it off. Same mix again, just in case you're wondering. Okay. And what we'll do is we'll just squeeze that out so it's no longer catching the eye. We can bring something down a bit closer to ground area, and then let me just let this dry off, or I'll speed dry it, then we'll put our figures in, then we'll look at what else might need doing to finish this painting. Just looking up there, I think that would benefit for being knocked back too. So if you like, I'm sort of seeing things in a bit of a vignette. I'm closing off the corners, I'm diffusing the corners of the painting. Okay, figures. These should take no more than a couple of minutes. And back to, let's dry it, the surface, before I go spoiling it with my hand. Okay, now this is probably, I'm better off here going back to my pickle jar lid, because these little figures are very dark. It's a dry brush mix, sort of mix. So my combination is the usual one for now. Ultramarine blue, a lot of it. Pick it up like you're mixing two one of these two-part adhesives. So ultramarine blue, burnt sienna. I'm also going to put a little bit of cerulean blue in there. That just gives a little bit of opacity. Now, you could just practice it. If you're not confident with putting these figures in, I suggest you take your sketchbook, any bit of paper, and you do a couple of little practice shapes. They're very abstract. All you really see is a head and a hint of the shoulders. You know, and you can turn the brush around if you want a leg of a chair or something like that and just drag the paint down from those shapes. But what is important is that you make a sort of horizontal line of them. That's quite important because the shadows between the tables and the chairs and the figures connect in a horizontal fashion along the ground. Where's my paint gun? I've lost my paint there. So there's my mix. Looking a bit blue, put a little bit more burnt sienna in there for now. Do I want to copy the position of them that they are in the photo? Probably not. Not exactly anyway. Some of them will be. Probably need to stay. Look at the gap here, that measurement, 6-7 inches between finger to finger. Don't put figures in the middle, okay? Even though they are in the photograph. Have them just offset here. Have them in multiple groups so they're all connected. Tiny bit more water required in my mix. Let's go over to this side where there's another group of people. And see if we can get this ground. Let's have one person here. You know, these are probably families out enjoying the sun. It could be children playing on the lawn, the odd little figure back there. If you're going to put a little figure back there on the lawn, give it a tiny little tail along the ground to suggest that the shadow. Let's try and get a shadow across to here. And like this. Now you can, and I'm going to do this, I'm just going to pick up a bit of cadmium red. I know it's not on the list, and you can tell me off later for this, but I'm just picking up a little bit of cadmium red, and we'll just hint upon that little bit of rich color. Put a little bit of cadmium yellow with the cadmium red, and just say there's a little bit of warmth amongst those figure shapes here and there in one or two places. Let's have a figure perhaps just walking through here. Let's start again with a bit of, let's say, burnt sienna. Oops, burnt sienna. And we'll put a figure, where should we put a figure? Perhaps just here. Just the head. But I'm guessing the height, it's about right, given that the figures sat down further away and not that much lower than this figure in the foreground. So there's the head. And then I'll give this figure, let's say, a bluish sort of body. Go back to my original color for some to suggest legs in movement. Of course, they're not full, they don't reach the ground. I tend to sort of do a sort of 1.5 leg sort of shape to suggest movement. But I'm going to put a little bit of red in the arm. I've left a little gap here to suggest there's some flesh. Perhaps it's a t-shirt. Person's wearing a t-shirt and you can see the sort of fleshy colored arm very slightly. And maybe their shadow is slightly cast over onto the paler ground back there like that. Just dotting the eyes, if you like, making sure I'm happy with these things. I mentioned the, I might just do a couple of things around the building. Could re-establish a line where if we think the roof, the edge of the roof is about here somewhere, we could put in the suggestion of a window back there, one or two, like that. Not much, just really just to hint upon that there is something there, that these folks are getting their coffees and their ice creams from this cafe. You know, sort of helps sort of create the story. Let's pick up a little bit. Oh, because I've left them white, I think we could just give those a little hit of red in one or two places. Very weak, very watery. If you don't like it, take it off. Perhaps give one of them a more bluey color. Don't spend any time on those. They're just shapes that break up an otherwise very flat area. And I'm just, as I say, I'm assessing it now. And I'd normally, if I'm honest, I'd normally take a little bit longer about this. I'd probably have a cup of coffee and then do what I'm doing now, just to sort of make sure that these are not just knee-jerk reactions to something that maybe didn't need doing. So just give yourself a bit more time. But I'm giving you some ideas to what I am thinking, what it needs. So some further delineation to that back line up here. Like that. I'm going to pick up, I think, a little bit of spattering in this otherwise flat area. Not too much. If you're going to spatter across the foreground like I'm doing now, just choose one side, one little area over here. Don't go spattering across the entire foreground. It's all about less is more. And finally, I'm back to my rigger brush, and I'm going to pick up the white gouache. Let's just close my palette, which is in the way. And I'm picking up my white gouache. If I can find it, there it is. And I may be inventing this, but it's based on practical thoughts, practical ideas. White gouache, top of this man's head or person's head as they walk through the foreground. The odd dot of white in amongst our picnickers. Picnickers, is there such a word? Maybe there's one of these little flag things on the end of the building back there. Little glimmer of something catching the light in the darks. A bit of general white spatter for summery effect. This is what gets you sneezing. This is why you need to take your antihistamines before you go out on a summer's day. This is the, as I say, this is what creates a sort of summery feel about it. Let's put the mount on it, and then perhaps make any further adjustments. So I say this, I think, probably this point in most of my paintings. I don't know really what I've got. I've enjoyed the process. I've thoroughly enjoyed it because every little area is its own little challenge. As long as you're remembering the cohesion of the overall effect, the whole picture. You try not to sort of think, well, you know, this must be painted and isolated, that must be painted and isolated. Everything you do here affects what's done over there. Everything that's done over there affects what's done up here, etc., etc., etc. Let's put the mount around it and see what we got. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it mediocre? I think it'll pass for the moment. You know, it's okay. It's mission accomplished, if you like. That's one thing I think we should be aware of when we're painting. And I'd like you to do the same. Is as of I used to say this a lot years ago. Every time you paint, whether it's good, the end result is good or bad or something in between, you write a simple note on the back of that. You date it and you write a simple note on it. Try to make a 2-line note, one positive and one, let's not call it negative, one that suggests maybe how you might be able to fix the thing that you perhaps don't like most out of your painting. It's very important, I think, to keep this simple record, journal on the backs of your papers, rather than sort of, you know, where's that book? Where's my book where I keep my notes and everything? Just pencil in a couple of simple points on the back of your painting, and refer back to them from time to time. You know, have a look at those paintings. Don't ever throw away a bad painting, or let's not call it a bad painting, a painting that didn't come out the way you wanted it to. Don't ever ditch them, never tear them up. It's in those paintings that you'll get your most benefit. We don't learn a heck of a lot from successful paintings. It's true, they're very nice and they're great for morale, but do you know, we learn so much from a bad painting. And this is why that advice to paint, keep picking up pieces of paper and putting something on those pieces of paper, because we learn from that, not by thinking we're under pressure to produce a masterpiece every time we pick up the paintbrush. Right, folks, well, I hope you enjoyed that one. That brings us to the end of part 2. Thanks for sticking with me on this. So if you want immediate notification as to when that becomes available, please remember to subscribe and hit the bell icon, which will make sure that you receive notification. Happy painting. See you at the next one.